My name is Eva Gasperowicz. I'm a developer programs engineer here at Google. And I'm very happy to see you here at today's session, and especially in the beautiful city of Krakow, which I'm very proud of. So welcome. My intention today is to shed some light on the process of transforming an existing website into a progressive web app. Me and my team, we recently went through a few of such processes, and I would like to share with you some of the things we find out on the way. Probably by now, you've heard a little bit about progressive web apps. The notion of PWAs is making rounds in the industry. And also, if you've been, by any chance, to some session about PWA, who've been in the morning? I've been there, yeah. Yeah, plenty of people. You probably know all of them by now. But in a nutshell, progressive web apps are experiences that combine the best of the web and the best of the apps. They are web experiences, which means they have the wonderful reach of the web. There is no installation, and every new experience is just one click away. At the same time, they use to the full extent the capabilities of modern apps and modern devices. It means they are fast, then don't make the user wait for them to load or react. They are integrated, which means they feel like a natural part of your device. They are reliable, which means they load and operate no matter the circumstances. And they are engaging, which means they give users pleasure from using them. This all sounds very new and very exciting, but is it really? Some years back, when I first got my hands on a smartphone and started to browse the web, I totally expected it to work just like on desktop. My expectation was that if I visit a URL, it actually loads, right? That's not too much to ask. And I expected it to load quickly within my attention span. And please mind that for people like me don't want to get stuck on the loading screen forever. And for people like me, the forever usually means like 30 seconds. That's the reality we live in. 30 seconds is already forever in mobile. So I wanted it to load fast. I wanted it to work smoothly, that I can actually enjoy using the app. And I wanted to have an easy way to access the content and be fully immersed in the experience. So those expectations are pretty old. It's not anything new to expect your website to work really well, just in the way we describe progressive web apps. So why do we even introduce this concept of progressive web apps as a new concept if all we want to talk about are actually websites just done so well that the user has a real pleasure from using it? We use progressive web app notion to build a mental model and to communicate better about our expectations towards the modern web. It just makes it easier for us to wrap our head around it. It also allows us to effectively communicate the expectations and the new possibilities that are coming to the web. And by talking about PWA, we can encode those expectations into different models. Here you can see 3 of such models. The first one is describing behaviors of a progressive web app: fast, integrated, reliable, and engaging. The second one is a PW checklist. If you just Google it and go to the first result, you will see a checklist of features that you can pay attention to in order to enable progressiveness in your app. And finally, we encode also a set of rules in a tool called Lighthouse. Lighthouse can audit a website and give you a report how progressive or not progressive it is. So these are 3 different models, 3 different formats of describing a progressive web app, but actually the notion is the same. I'm going to use different tools like this today to talk about progressiveness and how to achieve it on your own websites. OK, getting from a website to a progressive web app is a process. It looks roughly like this. As most of the projects, it starts with a thought, an idea, right? In my case, thinking is usually triggered by coffee, so here you go. We start with coffee. And while drinking coffee, you can also ponder about the scope of the project, about the things you want to achieve. After that, once you're done with your coffee, you can go and analyze your website to understand your starting point. You need to have a reference point once you're done implementing PWA features to know how you did. Next step is to prioritize. The truth is, we rarely have the resources to implement all of this stuff at once, right? And the cool thing about PWA is that it's a modular concept. It's not a monolithic technology. You can actually pick and choose what to implement and in what order. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. You should always set your priorities according to your user base and your business needs. So always talk to your stakeholders while prioritizing PWA features. Then, you should prepare your tools. Every job is easier when you choose the right tools to perform it. Finally, you can just execute your plan, implement the features. I'll talk about some issues that you can encounter at this step, although it's a very broad topic, and by no means I can be exhaustive here. At the end, there is sometimes an overlooked step, the evaluation, measure and evaluate. It gives you both a nice summary of how you did in your migration from website to progressive web app, but it can also be a very valuable starting point for your next iteration on the project. This is how the process looks like, and we're going to follow it throughout this presentation. OK, so while drinking our coffee, let's talk about the scope of PWA, what this notion actually includes. We know the goal. We want to deliver the delightful user experience, but what are the actual practical deliverables? Usually, when we talk about PWA, we talk about these three core technologies first. We talk about service worker and related techniques like caching. They allow you to offer your users an offline experience, but also they can improve reliability of your app, which can now load no matter the circumstances, and also positively influence the speed for your second-time visitors. Push notifications allow you to send user a message and bring them back to your app or re-engage them. Add to home screen allows you to make your app feel like a first-class citizen on your mobile. The user can install it to their home screen and access it easily, making it easy for them to go back to your app again. And all of it, of course, is enabled by HTTPS, which is a bottom line of a secure web experience. I like to call these three features a native parity core, because they actually allow us these days to do on the web the same things that just recently were possible only on native apps. And while they make me super excited about the future of the web, I think there is much more to progressive web apps than just the native parity. Well, let's fill some of this white space. Let's add a performance factor. I cannot stress enough how important it is to make your site fast and performant, preferably even before you implement service worker, push, and add to home screen. Making site performant includes a lot of techniques, like optimizing your assets, especially images, unblocking scripts, and making good use of browser cache. Getting this part right is especially important for your first-time visitors who do not have a service worker yet or are on browsers that don't fully support it yet. They have to rely on network in order to get to your site, so by making it more performant, using a lot of available techniques, you make life easier for them as well. As a matter of fact, going for PWA features is, in general, a very good audit opportunity, not only for performance issues, but also for UX issues and for other problems with your site. It is crucial to make your website of generally good quality before adding the additional complexity of PWA features. I personally call it PWA readiness. Especially if you plan to implement offline down the line, you need to be respectful of user resources like bandwidth and memory, and you don't want to push to users' cache a bloated website. Similarly, you don't want to send push notifications to the user only for him to come back to your site and discover he cannot perform the action he was asked to do because your forms are convoluted or are not accessible, right? So first, remember to fix the basic issues with your site, and only then move on to the PWA features. All right. Our site is PW ready, it's performant. We already kind of have an idea of how to implement service worker, push, add to home screen. Is it all we need to care about? Well, the web is always evolving. And only recently, 2 features were added to the platform, credentials management and payments. And I'm pretty sure there will be more APIs coming that will make your user experience even better on your websites. So you always need to keep an open mind about what's coming and what you can use in your projects. Finally, all of this is nothing if you don't top it up with a great UX. Good UX drives engagement, and without it, you might find that the gain from implementing all the underlying features is less than expected, just as I described with the push or with the service worker. So always make sure that all of these features are tied by a nice and smooth UX. Finally, it's always a great comfort and a good practice to make decisions based on data. For this, you need to measure things, both before and after the implementation of the PWA feature, actually throughout the whole process. So that's the full scope, in my opinion, of PWA concepts. It's much more than just the service worker, right? These are all the areas you should take into account, or at least think about, when investing how to approach adding PWA features to your site. Well, that's a big chart, and a lot to digest, and quite a monster. So how do you eat an elephant? I've heard one mouthful at a time. So let's start. We had our coffee, we understand the scope of our project. Let's actually start it. We start with analysis. First, you need to audit the website in order to understand the current state of the app. And in order to do that, we provide a very good tool, Lighthouse. Lighthouse is a great tool for website diagnostics. It's a Chrome extension that allows you to measure how close your web app is to a progressive web app. When you install the extension, Lighthouse, and run your website through it, it gives you back a score and a report that summarizes the state of your app for you. This is how the report, average report might look like, right? There are different areas where you need to pay attention to, and there is also a long list with explanations why your website got this score and not another, together with the links of how to make things better. So apart from being a diagnostic tool, it's also a very good educational tool, because just by checking a report for your website, you can learn a lot about how you can make this website better. One feature I wanted to call out is the share button in the top right corner. Apart from sharing, it allows you to save this report in JSON format. I really encourage you to save your report before you start any projects, because it provides you a benchmark and a reference point that you can compare to once your project finishes. Of course, Lighthouse is not the only tool available. There are other ones. And most of them actually also allow you to save the data somewhere. So if you have only 15 minutes to analyze your site, record and save the results from the tools mentioned above, Lighthouse, the security panel in Chrome DevTools, PageSpeed Insights, Web Page Test. It will allow you to understand the standing of your site, but also provide a reference for comparison after implementation. All right, so we analyzed our website, we saved our snapshots of data, and we know exactly how it performs in different areas. Now it's time to prioritize. This is the all areas I mentioned you should take into account. So the question is where to start. I would say start at the beginning. Ensure PWA readiness. No amount of PWA features will solve unresponsive, cluttered, or junky website. So before you add new complexity, you want your site to be as lean, smooth, working, and optimized as reasonably possible. In particular, based on your audit outcome, of course, because each site differs, you might look into the areas like optimizing images, easy thing and really brings big gains. Remove unnecessary code, leverage browser caching before you even switch to a service worker. Avoid blocking code and divide big monolithic JavaScript into smaller chunks if adequate for your website. These are common things that are very well known, but as your website evolves over time, sometimes they're overlooked and they kind of go off track. So going for PWA is actually a great moment to stop for a moment, audit them again, and fix the issues if you encounter any. Let me show you an example. Some time ago, I was working on womentechmaker.org site. I was doing exactly that. I was preparing it for some upcoming PWA features. Here you can see the network panel of the Chrome DevTools. What I did here, I just sorted the assets by size, and focusing only on the very top of this list, you can pin down the best targets for optimization. Here, the two biggest files were the YouTube API file and the hero image you can see on the home page. So the question was how to optimize those. Well, let's start with the hero image. It's a hero image, so it covers the whole viewport, so it needs to be as big as viewport, but it doesn't need to be bigger than that. So I just created two other versions of this file. I saved the medium and small images. I added a few breakpoints to my CSS. And as an outcome, on the medium size page, I got a 21% gain of lower weight of the images on that site. And this all took maybe 6 minutes altogether to perform. And it's 21% gain just by optimizing one image. Really small improvements can lead to big gains in this area. Similarly, I was able to replace heavy assets with simpler ones. Previously, we used the player API for YouTube video on the page, which today is actually possible to do with simple iframe with the correct configuration to embed a video. So I just replaced it with the iframe, and the whole 400 kilobytes of YouTube API disappeared from my site, right? And it's one line of code. It's very easy to do. Similarly, we realized that we don't use the full extent of the Lodash library. We just use few functions. So we can replace it with the core. It brings us from 24 kilobytes to 4 kilobytes. And maybe 20 kilobytes is not a great deal of amount of download data, but those small gains do add up. Finally, we started to leverage browser caching better. In the previous version of the site, we were caching our assets, we were versioning our assets by the build version. This means that with each build of our site, this number changed and the name of the file changed, which means the browser would need to download it again, even if this particular asset did not change, just because the overall build for the site changed. So we switched it to the content-based hashing instead. Now, only if the content of the file changes, we change the hash and therefore the file name, and this way we can optimize the browser caching. This allows users to download much less resources than in the previous use case. So you can see all of those changes were pretty simple and were very easy to achieve, and they did add up to big gains on our website. Once you are PWA ready, you should ensure safety of your users. We want to develop great progressive web apps in order to leverage the frictionless and accessible web out there. but the web is also dangerous. So keeping your users safe is hugely important. So I would go for HTTPS as one of the first things you implement on your site if you go for PWA. Also, a lot of new web APIs are actually require HTTPS to be enabled on your site, so it should be a natural step to take. Once your site is PWA ready and secure, you can simply follow your business need, and this pretty much depends on your site and on your business. For example, if user acquisition is important for your business, you should focus on perf, because performance site that loads quickly on the first visit allows you to gain some more users. If you have a huge bounce rate because of unperformant site, a lot of users don't even see your site in the first place. So for user acquisition, you might want to focus on perf. If you care about users that are in low connectivity areas, or in, I don't know, London Tube maybe, then you should focus on offline, on implementing service worker and the offline experience, because this is where the big gain for your users is. User retention, focus on push and add to home screen. This allows you to re-engage user in your experience. And you can pick and choose, because PWA is modular, and you can see which areas benefit your business best. All right. Now we're choosing the tools. And there is a lot of tools out there, right? There is a lot of tools. There are some starter packs and generators for different frameworks and libraries that allow you to build a progressive web app from scratch. But I want to focus on migrating an existing website to a PWA. That's why I will give a shout to one library in particular. It's the Workbox library. When developing offline experience, things might get a little bit fiddly. There is also a lot of boilerplate because many tasks are simply repetitive, like caching. So my advice is, don't do things by hand. They might bite you. Remove both stress and boilerplate with Workbox. And luckily, at 2:45, we have a wonderful workshop for you, from website to PWA with Workbox on the 3rd floor. So if you want to see all the ins and outs and gains you can get from this library for your website, go and check out that training. Yay, finally, we got to the point where we can implement our PWA features. This is the hardest part to give any generic advice on, because it differs a lot from project to project, right? So instead, let me share with you an example of how we solved an offline dilemma in the Women Tech Maker site. I think it shows nicely the type of problems you need to solve when implementing PWA features, in this case, offline. So this is a Women Tech Maker site, seen as online. And it's a beautiful site. It's a very rich visual experience, lots of images, really, really nice looking site. And I was supposed to implement offline experience for it. If I wanted to save all of this to cache, that would be very, very heavy. So caching all the images was rather a no-go. How about no images? Well, the site looks kind of ugly, but it's also unusable. Like, I can't even go to a different subpage because the menu button is missing. So it's totally unusable. Therefore, caching no images is also a no-go. How do we find a middle point? How do we negotiate this? Well, I took a deeper look at the website to really understand its structure. I divided images by function. Let's take a look. The yellow images are the navigational and action images. They are there so that user can navigate and perform some activities on our website. Therefore, they're crucial for the site to be fully functional. Then the red ones are branding and priority. They allow you to connect with your user. They're very important. For example, thanks to them, the user recognizes which site they're looking at, right? So they are like high priority images. Then the blue ones are decorative. They make the site look nice. They add to the experience. But if they're missing, they don't really break anything. The site is slightly less rich, but it's still usable. And the third type of pictures, the green ones, I call informative. It means they look nice, they add to the graphical layer of the site, but they also convey some message within them. So how do we deal with those 4 different types of images? Well, for navigation and action images, I just inline them with SVG. They're usually small, they're icon-like, so it's easy to do. And if you embed them in your HTML, if you cache HTML, they're going to always be there, right? So problem solved. You don't even need to come up with caching strategy with them, because if the HTML is there, your images are there as well. Now, branding and priority, I want for them to always be there, because they're important for me because of my business case. So I pre-cache them. It means when user enters the site, in this case, I pre-cache them with the Workbox library. I just push them to the user cache because they are important, and without them, their experience will be broken. Now, decorative, I employ the runtime cache strategy, which means as user navigates through the site and is online, I download those pictures and save to the cache, because there is high likelihood that the user will want to go back to those sites later on when they're offline. But if the user don't venture to some parts of my site, I just show a fallback instead, a placeholder, right? The site maybe looks less rich, but it's still usable, and I didn't bloat user cache with a lot of decorative images. Now, informative images are kind of fancy ones in the slot, because here I use full power of service worker. Service worker is just a JavaScript file, which means you can put a lot of logic into it. Here, I wanted to be able not to save all the logos to the user cache, but still convey the message who were the sponsors. So instead of the logos, I generate the images on the fly in service worker using the alt text from the image tag, right? So instead of saving all the images, I generate them on the fly to not have a real image, but still convey the message. And this is just an example of how you can deal with images and 4 different strategies. The message I want to convey is that you should really look deeply into the structure of your site and type of content you have, and try to divide it and come up with different strategies to different parts of your content. And this way, you can provide the best user experience for your users while offline. OK, once we implement everything, we need to evaluate the site. And it's often an overlooked step. Remember when I told you to save the snapshots of data from before the implementation? Well, now they come in handy. You can go again through the audit procedure and record all the same stack traces and compare the outcome with the previous version. Hopefully, it will give you a surge of joy as you see metrics improve on your site. However, there is one caveat. Metrics are helpful, but they are only metrics. Getting 100 on Lighthouse feels great. I can assure you, it feels really good. And it may also help to convince your stakeholders about the impact you achieved, or maybe get your project a funding for the next iteration. But it does not answer how the users are finding your changes, right? And as a matter of fact, PWA influences many areas of your app. It influences the UX. For example, now you need to consider a lot of offline scenarios. Like, for example, how users will try to buy your product when they're in an offline mode. It influences your workflow. You need to add things to users' cache, and it's very hard to do it, to manage this process manually. So maybe you need to invest into some build tools and into your workflow optimization. It influences your measuring. Now, a lot of interaction of your user with your site might happen when they're offline, right? So you need to implement offline analytics. And it might also influence your SEO, so you should check if nothing changed there or if the things were even improved on the SEO part. So that's the process. That's how we got from the website to PWA. First, we analyze the website, then we prioritize, and we choose the features we want to focus on. We get a set of tools to perform those actions. Then we implement our changes, and then we evaluate it. And the important thing is, this can be an iterative process, right? Like each ending point where you measure can be also a starting point for the next iteration of your website. The web develops, and your websites will develop over time as well, and your user needs will change over time. So you need to keep going back and checking what can be done to provide better experience for them. Luckily, you're not alone in this road for perfection of your websites. There is a lot of resources, and a lot of them are available to you today at this conference. There is Lighthouse tool. You can use it both as a Chrome extension and online. And there is one real-life Lighthouse on the first floor, so feel free to give it a try. There are site clinics where you can consult the healthiness of your site with Googlers. They happen on the third floor. We held some office hours. If you have any questions after this session or want to talk to me, I'll be present in the office hours area on the third floor after the session. There is the instructor-led training, quarter to 3, that walks you through Workbox. And of course, there is the progressive web apps section on developersgoogle.com that I really encourage you to try out. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the session, and see you around.